Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us today. And I'm so excited because I actually am getting to host one of the women who absolutely inspired me in early childcare. We have known each other now for over 20 years in the industry, which is kind of hard to believe when I start to do math and I start to panic. But I am so excited to have Kelly Ramsey joining us today. And Kelly is going to share with us a little bit about a book collaboration that she was a part of. And well, we never know where the conversation will take us from there. So, Kelly, welcome so much to Childcare Conversations with Kate
Wait,
and Carrie.
wait a second. I think you need to do more of Kelly's bio, or Kelly needs to do more of her bio, because she could just be some lady we saw when we were at the park. And I think we need to give Kelly an opportunity to explain why she's so cool.
Isn't that the whole 20 minutes? Like, we're going to get 20 minutes of why Kelly's so cool. But that's a great point, Carrie. So, with that, Kelly, why don't you do a really, well, not a really quick, because people need to know why I'm so excited that you're here and kind of what we're going to talk about. So, I'd like to toss it to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Kate and Carrie. It's great to be with you today. I am Kelly Ramsey. I'm the owner of Developing People Incorporated in Oklahoma City. And my work in early childhood actually started in 1984. So I won't date myself, but at that point and at that time, I had just graduated high school. I was starting my career in early childhood as a assistant teacher at Jardin Montessori School in Berkeley, California. Had no idea that that journey would lead me all the way 3.5 decades later to being a leader, national leader with NAEYC as the vice president right now, and a mom, as well as a wife the second time. So lots of things in between that start of the journey. But what I remember most distinctly was this school really set a catalyst for what does it mean to partner with children and families in order to cause them to grow and develop. So that's what I learned from Richard Fran, was the owner of Jardin Montessori School. So that was my beginning. And then the journey kept me in and took me all over the Bay Area, various schools and settings. And then I became a director. And that was by happenstance. My director was going to be exiting, and she was grooming me without letting me know she was grooming me. And so I was like, just go do your work in your office, leave my artwork alone, let me do what I do with my 2-year-olds, and don't bother me, and I won't bother you, right? And so she had a different plan. She saw me as a leader, and so she started taking me to community meetings. I got involved with the Southern California Association for the Education of Young Children, and I ended up being the director of the center I worked at. And what I learned in that process was that people were the most important thing. There goes developing people. And those people could be both children, it could be families, and it could be my staff and my teachers. So I really learned what it meant to serve people. So that was my beginning of my career. And then I came to Oklahoma, moved to Oklahoma, stopped being the director, and found the local Oklahoma AEYC where I met Kate in that process. And so that began my journey of really looking at systems work and working with Head Start, and how could I change the trajectory of both the children and families' lives, but the teachers who were the greatest resources. So that's where I began that work. That journey brought me to working with Head Start, developing my own team over 10 years, and serving children and families by creating systems that really supported the teachers who were the center of that work. And that brought me to our topic of our book, Stories of Resistance, the story of Black women in early childhood leadership, a compilation of a book of 12 women of color sharing their story of what it means to resist in systems that may not be serving us well, but how do we tell our story about that process? That book came about by a conversation with a friend of mine, Alyssa, at a NACCE conference, asking ourselves, how do we get here? How do we get to this table? And thinking about our journey and thinking about how do we create a space, a table, an opening for other women to also be at the table without compromising our values and what we believe for. So Stories of Resistance was birthed, and now it is a real thing and book and our story and our panels really help other women to see themselves as leaders in early childhood. So long part of a story, but short journey. 3.5 decades later, here I am continuing the
Like,
work, right?
I'm not really sure
My
that's
short,
short.
short discussion.
I mean, it depends on how you're doing time. Like in preschool time, it's really long. In like dinosaur time, it's very short.
Yes. Very
Okay,
true,
I'm
very true.
going with that one. I'm going to start deciding everything is based on dinosaur time because then I'm really not very old. And I love that. I love that concept, Carrie. So, well, Kelly, I'm so excited that you're here to share a little bit about the book, but also your panel. But I just want to ask, now that all of this has happened, what's the one thing that stands out that you're like, yep, this is what I want everybody who's listening to know. I want them to know this.
I would say the one thing that stands out is that when we center people, be it children, families, teachers, we have to remember they come with a story, right? And they're not just their roles that they play. They're not just the happenstance meeting that we have in that moment. They have a whole life trajectory that they bring with them. So when they step into our room, into our office, know that they're bringing all of that with them. And I say that because my story evolves around my upbringing in the Bay Area, growing up as a firstborn daughter of three girls, first granddaughter on both maternal and paternal side, and all the rich history that I bring. But it also, at the core, is me as a mom later in life. So becoming a mom after working with children and families, being a teacher, being a parent educator, and then at 40, having my first son, and then at 42, my second son, right? And so that's a part of that story. That's a part of the lens that I bring. And it reminds me to always take time to really get to know the people that we're interacting with because they have stories that they can tell. And most of those stories are not a linear path, lots of up and down and lots of things happening, but all of it is important. And we need to really learn about who people really are. So.
Absolutely. And I think being aware that you may not see all the identities that somebody wears, because there's some of our identities we wear in our hair and in our skin and in the clothes we put on, but other parts of our identity, like firstborn daughter, late in life mother, those I can't see from just looking at you,
No.
right? So we have to be aware that to get the true who someone is, we have to take some time to get to know them, to give them time to share with us those elements of their identity that they want to share. And also to be respectful that sometimes people don't want to share all of their identities.
Exactly.
Can I
I,
just
I
be a superhero and only share my identity I want to share at the time? I'm going to tell you that there's a lot that's going to be hidden and I don't want to share.
Right. Carrie, you made me remember I was doing a workshop and I told in the workshop, I said, you want to bring your full self into the classroom, all of who you are, all of your existence. And a woman raised her hand. She's like, I can't do that because that would scare the children. So I have to put on this mask coming in because I can't reveal all of that to the children. I was like, we understand, and that is perfectly okay, right? But what I was getting at was like, we have to be whole, healed, complete. And as we're doing that process, then we get to bring and emerge as our full self, right? Because if we really did show up with all of those identities and all of those things, we probably would like shut down the program, right? So I learned how to take, that concept and then unpack it slowly through my own storytelling. And then what happened is that people began to identify themselves in the story that I was telling. They were a mom later in life. They were firstborn. And after I was finished speaking or doing a workshop, they would come up and they would tell me one on one, here's what resonated, or I cried when you said this because that was my experience. And so I learned that that's a way that I could center them by listening and being attuned to how we identify to one another. So very true. May not want to disclose all the things.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to be honest about who you are and your experiences in the world, which is part of why I think the book that you worked on is so important, and giving people that whole, if I see it, I can be it
Mm,
concept, because it is ridiculous the number of conferences I go to in our industry, which is 95+% female and slightly majority minority as far as who's actually working in the field. And the person doing the keynote is a white guy who hadn't been in a classroom in the last 25 years. And I'm like, excuse me, how is that helping the participants at a conference see something that they can be? Okay, so
right.
the 7 guys at that conference see something that they can be. But what about the other 993 people in that audience? They need to see somebody who looks like them or who has identities that they can resonate with.
Yes, yes. So true. So true.
So, Kelly, I have a question for you. So, we have directors who are listening to today's episode and they're probably nodding their head, right? Like they're listening to us going, they're like, yeah, yeah, I get that. That's so true. But I think they get stuck on the implementation.
Mm,
So, how could a director who's fairly new, maybe a first year director who is struggling because they want everybody to accept them as a professional. They're young, maybe this is their first time, and they
They're
want
like you were back in California.
they want to
yes,
they want to
exactly.
listen to folks, right? Like they want to be you, but
Yes.
it's that balance. How would you encourage them to move forward? I'm going to go with safely, and the fact that they
Safe.
don't want everything out of everybody.
Yes. So that is me when I was in California for sure. And I laugh because I was a teacher and then I moved into the director role. So what I knew for sure is that teachers want to make sure they have the supplies that they need because that was one of our lacks. Like we didn't know we're getting more cotton balls, so I'm going to hoard 5 backs that I have because they're going to run out and I will have cotton balls, right? And so my first thing I would say is meet a need, whatever that immediate need is. And it can be something as simple as the supply cabinet is stocked every Thursday. You can depend that every Thursday things are going to be replenished so you don't have to hoard them. And don't say that out loud. Just say Thursday is the restocking day. Come take what you need. And, every Thursday and write on the list if we're missing it and we're going to get it, right? So that's in the budget. We can deliver on those things. The second is that I help people to be seen because they were coming through the doors ready for work in their classrooms, and then we see them leaving at the end of the day. And so one of the ways that I help help them to be seen was I would go around in the morning to greet them in their room, in their space. Not to give them a report, not to get on them about the bikes being left out last night, just to say good morning, have a great day, and let them know I'm in the building, I'm here, but I also want to come and greet you. Now, part of that was they had to get trust me to know that I didn't have another agenda, right? That it
Yeah.
was just to say good morning and to greet. And I had one of my she did all of our food prep. And she was so used to not getting her needs met. She would meet me in the parking lot when I would pull up. She'd be watching at my door. And I immediately was like, you cannot come to the parking lot. You cannot come to my door. I will come to you and I will find out what you need. It took her a little bit, like a month, to break this habit. But I was the same each time, like, good morning. I'm gonna come visit you. Let me put my stuff down in my office. I didn't say, don't come to my car anymore, but I was like, I want to make sure I hear you fully. I will come to you and I would go to her first. So I wouldn't make her wait. And so what she wanted was to know, like, I don't have enough for cereal for all the rooms. Our order didn't come in. And so I helped her to be empowered to say, you can be creative. You can change the menu. Let them know you're changing the menu. And then order twice as much cereal as what you're going to need so you won't run out if your order messes up. And it empowered her such, she was like, I want to show you what new thing that I tried. But she was so used to not getting her needs met, she was fearful that I wasn't going to see her and recognize her. And so that was the second big thing. The third thing is make sure you take time to unplug and time for yourself. Because you can, like, as a director, once you hit, even before you come to the grounds, they're on your phone usually. You're going to be going, 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 going. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. So have something in your space that you can light a candle, sit and take a moment to woosah or breathe or leave the premises, go have coffee, come back. Nothing falls apart. If it does, it'll still be there when you get back. So get the coffee, plug in for yourself, and then be able to move forward. But you be gentle with yourself. It's a new thing, and they're really recognizing you're new, you're figuring it out. But if you do it together, you can support each other. So those are all real things that I've lived through and went through.
Carrie, I know that you and I have had this discussion and you share it a lot. And we've just wrapped up a pretty monumental diversity day as far as a country in the United States, which is Martin Luther King Day. And Carrie, I don't know how many times I've heard you tell the story about the fact that you only ever had the one diversity puzzle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I had multiple versions. So my QIP program when I ran my school, so I had 3 schools, and every year it didn't matter if it said that I had plenty of things that were diversity and multicultural and uh, anti-bias, but every year I would get this pack of puzzles, and there would be at least one Martin Luther King puzzle every year. And I was like, after about 4 years of this, so 4 times 3, so I had and I had some before they started giving me this, and I'm like, I have 26 puzzles with the picture of Martin Luther King Day, or of Martin Luther King, or of Martin Luther King with his kids and Coretta Scott King. And I was just like, how many puzzles of this one man do we need? I think he's great. I have memorized many of his speeches. Wonderful guy. But us setting aside the day for recognizing his work was supposed to be emblematic of a change and a broadening of who we saw as heroes. So can I have some puzzles with some other diverse people on the puzzle? Could I have a Malcolm X puzzle? Can I have a Maya Angelou puzzle? Can I?
Right.
We've if we only see one person as the icon, if we're like the only way you can be a early childhood leader of color is to follow exactly Kelly Ramsey's steps, then we haven't created a pathway.
No, not at all.
And so having a book that gives multiple people's visions of how to be a leader in early
Yes.
childhood, I think is much
Yes.
better than everybody getting the same puzzle.
Yes. Yeah. I so agree, and I can resonate with that, Carrie, because we often will attach to one particular narrative, right? And one of the it was a TED Talk. I'll figure out the name and the show notes and submit, but she talked about the narrative of a single story. So if all of us have the same story, then it resonates only with those people that it resonates with. But it's each of us, like in our book, it's 12 women with 12 different stories of what resistance looked like for us. And each of us chose a word to represent what that looked like. For me, my word was planet. Planet was the word because it resonated with my ancestors. It resonated with my foundations, what I started all my life, and the story I told at the beginning, that when I come into the room, I'm bringing all of them with me in that one time and my own experiences as well. And so we have to be able to come in an authentic way, which is also one of the chapters. And so each of them talk about their own story. One of my mentees, Jerletha McDonald, is in the book, and she talks about being raised by her grandmother and being very tall young lady, and her grandmother telling her, be exactly who you are. All of who you are is necessary and important. And you don't ever shrink back or try and make yourself be smaller, because that's not who you are. So come authentically as you are. So when you look at Jerletha today and you see her as a mom, you see her as a grandmother, you can see her teachings of her grandmother coming and resonating and coming forth. It's important that not only one story gets told, but all of the stories. And so going back to being a director, before I was a director, the 2-year-old classroom, loved my 2-year-old classroom. I had the first anti-bias curriculum book, Louise Dermis Marks, the red book, if you know the cover, right? And in the back of there was a questionnaire for families to tell us about who they are and what they were. And I was in Glendale, California, so we're a little pricey in our program. And so not a whole lot of diversity, but some diversity in our program. And I never forget giving those questionnaires to the families, and families coming back and saying, I don't have a story. Like, we don't have any history. I was like, do you have traditions? Do you have things you do as a family? And one of those things was having a picnic and being able to bring whatever you have for that picnic. They were like, because we didn't have a lot of money. So if it was peanut butter and jelly, if it was bologna sandwich, if it was tuna, whatever we had, we made it from the kitchen, and we would sit down as a family and eat together. So from that family share, that story, we started to have a family day where everyone brought their picnic basket, paper bags, a burger, fries, whatever they wanted to bring, and they were enjoying this moment together. And what it created was an annual event that we started to celebrate who's the families were, but their stories of how they would bring it forth. So we had a grandfather who was a train conductor. He came in his overalls with this train cap. His grandson went to the center, and he loved the trains because what? He had sat with grandpa talking
Yep.
about trains and doing all the things. We had no idea. We had another family who rode horses. And so as a little boy, he was on the horses as he was young. So they came and told that story. So all these stories started emerging about the core of who they were as working people, as people who were dedicated to their communities. There were farmers. There were all different type of people, and they made their own discoveries in that. And so while we couldn't find the puzzles in the books in every culture, we did have culture in the space, and we just brought it and opened it up and invited them to come into our classrooms, read stories. Some of them were verbal storytelling, which is now a lost art, but they were verbally telling the stories from their childhood to the children they were enthralled, right? All of these things. And so there's ways that we can bring those things in. And as center directors, always knowing that you're creating your own culture within your school and within your program. And that's important. That's important to bring forth, and it's important to center that as well.
Oh, Kelly, I love that. Thank you so much. So, only because it is, the first month of the year, and you said something that I loved, and I'm just going to have you kind of wrap up with this. One of the things that you said was in the book, each one of you identified with a word. And I know that this is a popular thing to do in January, is that people go, oh, this is my word for the year, or
Yes.
and they're usually like vision or imagine or I don't know, something. So I loved your word and I loved how you shared that. If somebody was listening to this and they're like, oh, I have a word, may not be a word that's a PG word, but I got a word. So if you were going to inspire the next generation of early child care leaders, which I'm sure that you do on a daily basis. Anybody who's ever met you absolutely would have to put you in their top 10. If not, I need to talk to them. Anyway, let's talk about, how would you encourage somebody to find their word, whether that's an annual word or just how they might kind of look at their own personal story.
Yeah. So I am like smiling because I am that word of the year girl, right? So I have been consistently doing this practice since 2006. And so there's lots of ways so you can like Google it out, you'll find the different things. I use Allie Edwards' one little word is what I use. And so over the years, around September, is when I start thinking about like what's gonna the new year gonna unfold. And so literally I write down, and you'll see this in my journals, like possibilities for the words of what I want to bring in. And then that word always speaks to me, and then it's highlighted. So just this week, I got my word for the year, and that word is capacity. And so I think about, I'm still unpacking it because it doesn't just happen like beginning of the year, January 1st. I know the word and whatnot. It's really supposed to unfold with you, right? So last year, my word wasn't a word, it was actually two phrases. It was be present was my word in his presence. So being present was about being totally, where I was at the moment, creating space for that. So this year's word is a little different. So capacity for me is about both enlarging my own capacity so I can pour out at a greater level, but it's also creating capacity to hold things and systems and ways of being with people. And so I know that it's going to invoke connections. I know it's going to invoke some stretching. So when I think about capacity, I always think about Stephen Covey, the jar with the rocks, and do I have any more
Yeah.
space for those things, right?
Mhm.
Putting in the big rocks first, and then the little rocks, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, and then the water. And you're like, I didn't know it could hold all that, right? So it depends on how you stack it. And so I think about those images. So when I find that word, then I'm looking for images that will help me to convey that. Of course, I have to do a vision board that also encompasses like what that looks like. And what's important is that it doesn't stay stagnant. So one, yes, I have this word, but I'm living into it all throughout the year. And sometimes I may change it too. So maybe it didn't fit. Maybe it only fit for a few months. Maybe it fit for the whole year. Who knows? But I start to look at what that looks like and what is it inviting into my life and how am I receiving that, right? And then being able to move forward. So words matter. And I would really, really like encourage you to find the word for both personally and for you professionally, because it could be two different things too. And so sometimes my word holds all of those things together. Other times I have a different focus for each of those worlds, if you will. So, yes. So watch me with my word capacity. Let's see what we can create.
Oh, I
And
can't
it's
wait. That's definitely something we're trying to build. Building capacity is very much part of what Child Care Conversations and Director Success Academy is trying to do in this year also. So
yeah.
I like
And
that word.
it helps you also to recognize that there's actually more that we could do than what we're doing. Like if we don't stretch, sometimes we don't realize that we have the capacity for more because we've been safe, right? And so we just stay with this little small size box. I don't need to go bigger than this. And it reminds me of the story where the grandmother was like, "Why are you cutting off the end of the ham?" She's like, "Because that's what how you always did it." She's like, "I cut it off because my pot wasn't big enough." So there was no secret sauce to the cutting off and the end of the ham. This is the way you make the ham. And they were like, "Oh, she didn't have the capacity for the whole ham. So she had to cut off a piece of it, right?" And so when we get the right size pot, we can enlarge our capacity. In the same way, we may need to, like, we've shrunk some things back because we couldn't fit. Maybe time to change that container, right?
Oh, I love that analogy. I've got all these visions and I'm hungry. All right. Like, okay, Carrie, you get to wrap us up today.
Okay. So if you know of anybody who would love this conversation with Kelly, if you know somebody who needs to know, share the show with them. Go in and write a reference. That's the wrong word. Write a review. Let Kelly know that you really resonated with what she had to say today. And we hope to hear you. No, we hope you'll hear us next week. Boy, I'm having a hard time with this outro today, but we hope that you'll hear us again next week and you can listen to us on all the different places you can do podcasts, YouTube, Spotify,
Wait, wait,
Apple
wait,
Podcasts.
wait.
What?
If you want to be a guest, if you want to be Kelly,
Oh.
you can come to www.childcareconversations.com and fill out an application, and you can come to be one of our guests in 2025.
Okay, so we'll talk to you next week.